So we did touch upon Philip Larkin last time, and we did one of the poems, two of the poems, Days and Next Please. We talked about Philip Larkin's general outlook on life and how he is perceived today. When we first read Philip Larkin, and you have to always remember that everything that we are studying for an exam. And the syllabus is very neatly divided into two parts, paper one and paper two. Paper two spans from 1900 till whatever the latest book we have, A.K. Ramanujan. Every text that we are doing has to fit in some literary or cultural age. And we have secondary topics to test our understanding of those literary ages as well. Literary eras, literary movements, whatever you want to call them. So in paper two, we start with modernism. The official start of modernism is after the end of Victorian, which is 1901, which is marked by the death of Queen Victoria. 1901 until the end of the Second World War, 1950s, early 50s or late 1940s. Then after the war, we have post-war literature, where we have Philip Larkin and Samuel Beckett. And also a play by Osborne, Look Back in Anger. So we have three texts that are after post-war texts. Philip Larkin, as I said, a few concepts that you have to remember. For Philip Larkin, I always look at every text contextually to the questions asked. Right? So every text, every author, UPSC has been based on the PYQs of last 10-15 years. UPSC has been primarily interested in 3 or 4 concepts per text or author. I told you last time about am I not audible to anyone? Am I audible? If not, please write in the text chat window.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
I should be audible.
Yes, sir.
Everything is fine. If I'm not audible, just write in the chat window. So, yes, I told you last time how the questions are categorized, can be categorized. I told you author-based questions, text-based questions, literary theory-based questions, secondary topic-based questions, stylistics versus the content and the form-based questions. So when we talk about Philip Larkin, one of the areas that UPSC has been interested in is his pessimistic, nihilistic, sad outlook to life. Right? That is a concept that we talked about last time. Another thing is how his poems stylistically, technically, how his poems, to quote that quote, that they are freshly created universes, soul freshly created universes, as in he does not use myths or any external allusions or references to other texts or other cultural or literary references. That's another concept. The third concept that we look at Philip Larkin's poems is it derives from that pessimistic, nihilistic, sad, the post-war perspective at life, which is someone, Philip Larkin, Samuel Beckett, Osborne, they lived through the wars. I think Philip Larkin was born in 1923, so he must have at least seen the Second World War. So they experienced the war, the massacre and uh, the whole destruction, devastation of the war. So they lived through it. And then we have a period after the war where the world is going through a calmer, quieter, trying to get to a stable world. And the life is less exciting and bland and monotonous as compared to the previous 50 years of the 20th century, which we see very prominently in Osborne's Look Back in Anger. That is one major theme of that text. So today we'll look at deceptions and Mr. Bleaney and see another aspect of Philip Larkin's poetry. And we'll also touch upon Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad, which is technically the first modernist text of our syllabus. It came out, I think, in 1902, 1903, something like that, turn of the century. And it is an interesting text because Joseph Conrad he grew up, he was a Polish citizen, but he grew up, he spent most of his time on the empire's ships in the sea, and he spent his time in France, England, and he could fluently write in multi languages, English, French, Polish. And he grew up during the Victorian times, grew up reading the Victorian literature. And just a second. Right, so Joseph Conrad lived in the Victorian times studying Victorian literature. So this text, Lord Jim, is kind of a crossover between the Victorian and the modernist style, which we'll talk about. So coming back to why am I not able to Om Namo Bhagavate. Why? Okay, just a second. I'm not able to share for some reasons. I don't know what's wrong. It's showing error. Something stupid is happening. Screen sharing as okay. So I'll read from my phone. So you're gonna have to open your text of deceptions. Uh, Everyone's got your texts open. You got your texts for deceptions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It starts with a few lines from apparently from a newspaper, London Labour and the London Poor. Of course, I was drugged and so heavily I did not regain consciousness until the next morning. I was horrified to discover that I had been dreaming, and for some days I was inconsolable and cried like a child to be killed or sent back to my aunt. So this sets the tone and the theme of the poem, that there is a character who was drugged and then physically or sexually molested. On this, the poem starts. Ever so distant, I can taste the grief, bitter and sharp it stalks. He made you gulp. The sun's occasional print, the brisk, brief worry of wheels along the street outside where bridal London goes the other way. And light, unanswerable and tall and wide, forbids the scar to heal and drives shame out of hiding. All the unhurried day, your mind lay open like a drawer of knives. Slums, years have buried you. I would not dare console if I could. What can be said except that suffering is exact? But where desire takes charge, readings will grow erratic. For you would hardly care that you were less deceived out on that bed than he was, stumbling up the breathless stair to burst into fulfillment's desolate attic. So what a wonderful poem. Now we see that it starts with the poet or the narrator or the speaker, right, in the first person in the first line. Even so distant, I can taste the grief. Now, throughout this poem and throughout Philip Larkin's poetry, there is something that I personally like in writing, creative writing at least. The use of sensual triggers, sound, auditory, visual, of course, and the touch, smell, the fragrance. So it starts with even so distant in terms of maybe time, distant in terms of maybe the speaker does not know the protagonist directly, but still I can taste the grief. Bitter and sharp with stalks, he made you gulp. So that is referring probably to the drug drug coffee or drug drink, whatever she was made to drink. The sun's occasional print. The brisk brief worry of wheels along the street outside where bridal London bows the other way, and light, unanswerable and tall and wide, forbids the scar to heal and drives shame out of hiding. So when you read it, an image of a girl hiding with knees folded in a corner, head down, trying to hide her face between her legs, between her knees, and the occasional sun's print. Even, when it's a classic case of describing a depressed person, that person likes to hide away from everything and everyone. Even the light disturbs you. And he has used light literally as well as metaphorically. Light as in the sun's occasional print, and light unanswerable, tall and wide as in the tall windows. Tall windows, as if throwing light on something. Now, when something like this happens to someone, talking about it or reminiscing or remembering or recollecting that is the last thing you would like to do, and that is the cause of the extreme pain, because the person is not able to let go of it. So the irony is that's the last thing you would want to remember or think about, but you're not able to let it go. You hold on to it. The world keeps on running outside that window, outside that house. Now, bridal London, what's the figure of speech here? Where bridal London bows the other way. Can anyone tell me what's this figure of speech? Please write it in the
Personification.
chat. Personification. Okay. Bridal London bows the other way, and light unanswerable, tall and wide. So there are so many visual clues working literally as well as metaphorically. And that is a creative genius, to be able to use a figure of speech in such a way that it works both ways, literally as well as metaphorically. The worry of wheels, the traffic outside, the people outside, everything that is, the world is carrying on, it's looking the other way. Bridal London. Now, what does that refer to? There is an extremely touchy, painful thing the speaker has touched upon. This incident probably happened sometimes in the Victorian age, because this is an old clipping. I've somewhere seen the date on this as well. It's not in this here. And she says that I had been ruined. So her chances of getting married in a good household are also gone. So her chances of becoming a bride are also ruined. So that's why bridal London goes the other way. She's kind of now, something terrible happened to her and she has become an outcast. And she's hiding in a corner where even the light, the days, she's so sensitive that even the light is troubling her. And the people are carrying on, looking the other way. She has been outcast. She's living with this terrible nightmare and trying to forget it, but holding on to it at the same time. All the unhurried day for her, outside there are wheels of worry of wheels. They're moving. The world is going on. But inside, the day is unhurried. The time moves very slowly when you are in extreme pain. And your mind lay open like a drawer of knives. What is this figure of speech? Your mind lay open like a drawer of knives. It's pretty simple. Who's gonna tell me? Like a drawer of knives. Simile. So what does that mean? Your mind lay open like a drawer of knives. That's an extremely disturbing image. And it's such a fantastic image to describe someone with acute depression. There are so many points of incision that are harming you constantly. Yeah. If any one of you had an acute migraine, this is how it feels like. The mind lay open like a drawer of knives. So that's how she is. And now the sad part. The speaker comes to the sad part. The sad part is slums and years have buried you. She doesn't matter to the society. She has been outcast. Such an drastic, humongous episode in someone's personal life, but she's been buried. I would not dare console you if I could. So basically, he's telling us that this poem is not about consoling, but he's giving a point of view that is the nearest thing he can do, poet can do, to make her feel better. I dare not console you even if I could. Because the words, and that is again something, somebody in depression or somebody in acute pain or agony, words of wisdom, words of consolation are the last thing that person needs. If you ever experienced personally in your life something, God forbid it happened or happens, or even when we are in extremely bad mood or something happened and we don't. So the first thing that happens to us is that we don't want to talk about it to anyone. We just don't want to talk about it, right? Because words cannot console what the other person is going through. So he starts with, I would not dare console even if I could. What can be said? What can be said? This is a question. What can be said except that suffering is exact? Suffering is exact as in the person who experiences suffering, only that person understands it exactly. Nobody else can understand it. Suffering is exact for that person. What can be said except that suffering is exact? But where desire takes charge, readings will grow erratic. So now this is the part where he's saying that I'm not consoling you. I'm not going to try and use my words to console you. But what can be said about somebody whose readings, as in whose calculation of life, whose calculation of things are erratic in themselves? Now he's talking about the antagonist or the person who perpetrated this violent crime. When desire takes charge, readings will grow erratic. What can be said about that person? For you would hardly care. Now he's addressing the protagonist, the character directly. For you would hardly care that you were less deceived. Now, because she was drugged and then abused, so she was deceived by this person. And most probably that person might have been somebody she trusted. So she was deceived. It was not done by a stranger, that she was shocked and violently, forcibly put to submission. She was deceived by somebody she trusted. So now he's saying you were less deceived out on that bed than he was. Stumbling up the breathless stair, again, breathless stair, figure of speech. Stumbling up the breathless stair to burst into fulfillment's desolate attic. What a fantastic phrase to end with. And he's actually touched upon a very profound idea of desires as explained in the Indian philosophy. When desires take hold of a person and someone's driven by a desire and only to fulfill that desire, and by hook or by crook, so not all desires are bad, but desires that propel you to ignore the right or wrong, the moral, the ethics, you just want to have it, that desire. Those desires take away your sensible mind or sensible discretion, as we say. And when desires, and the end result of desires, as it is said in the Indian philosophy as well, the end results of any desire is, in the end, you don't feel fulfilled. Right? So desires breed desires, not fulfillment. And that's what he said, bursting into fulfillment's desolate attic. You know the meaning of desolate, right? So how is he deceived? He was deceived because he expected his desire to be fulfilled and gave him fulfillment, gave him what he expected to have out of this, but he was deceived. And that's pretty deep, because you think about any desire, like Brad Pitt say in Fight Club, the things that you own end up owning you. So you want to have a brand new phone, and you just want to have it because everyone else got it, and you feel that once you have that phone, iPhone 14, iPhone 15, whatever, you're gonna feel extremely happy, and you know it's gonna made you up. It's gonna make your life much happier. That's a desire, and you just want it so badly. But as soon as you get that phone, the excitement fades away in a few hours or a few days, a few weeks at max. And then after a few weeks, when you think about the person, the state you were in before you had that phone, if you compare the two states, you would feel that you were deceived by your desire, because your desire promised to you that this is going to fulfill your life. But now after you have it and it's there, you would say, yeah, okay, it's a nice phone, but I think it's not what I really expected out of it. And that happens with every desire. The moment you have it, it's kind of, you've been deceived. That's the nature of desires. So this poem is one of his best poems. And in the first stanza, he describes the situation. Obviously he does not know that character. He's just creating that character up and trying to empathize with that character. And in the first stanza, he describes her situation now, after the incident. And in the second, he's not trying to console, but he's giving an alternative view that it is not you who should be holding on to it and feel guilty and sinful and ruined because of this, because you were actually not deceived. That person was deceived. So he should be feeling this, not you. Because he perpetrated a crime knowing fully well he was doing something wrong for a desire that left him in a desireless fulfillment's desolate attic. Right? Now, I often talk about that, how do you read poetry? Because there are poems in the syllabus and I won't be able to go through all of the poems, and I will not go through all of the poems because I really want you to understand how to go through poems, how to go through poetry. And is there a way to understand? Because Paradise Lost, for example, we have 4 books in the syllabus, but you're going to have to read all the 10 books of Paradise Lost. And we won't be able to cover the entire thing, and I won't be. So how do you read poetry? How do you make sense of poems? First of all, you read them out loud. You understand the punctuation and you read them out loud. That's the first step. You read them a couple of times. I've made a wonderful video on YouTube, one of the earlier videos where I talk about how to read poetry. So when I read out loud, let's start with the first couple of lines. Even so distant, I can taste the grief. Bitter and sharp with stalks, he made you gulp. Now this is a complete sentence. If you read line by line, trying to understand line by line, it's not going to help you. You have to read sentence by sentence. In some poems, there are no punctuations, but there still would be sentences. There still would be full stops. Some poets do not use commas to break the lines, but there still would be sentences. So you find the sentences. The next sentence is, it starts the third line and it ends on the second last line of the stanza. It's a long sentence and it has a lot of phrases in between. The sun's occasional print, the brisk, brief worry of wheels along the street outside, where bridal London goes the other way. 2 phrases. And light, unanswerable and tall and wide, forbids the scar to heal. So when this sentence starts, the sun's occasional print, we have the major verb towards the end, major couple of verbs, forbids the scar to heal and drives shame out of hiding. These are the 2 verbs you have to work with to make sense of this long sentence. Forbids the previous 3 phrases, they give you the ideas. Sun's occasional print, brisk, brief worry of wheels along the street outside, where bridal London goes the other way, and light, unanswerable, tall and wide, forbids the scar to heal and drives shame out of hiding. 2 major verbs. Then the last sentence is, all the unhurried day, your mind lay open like a drawer of knives. The first thing is you read out the poem, find the sentences, read the sentences. Second is, I've also made a video somewhere where I'm talking about different figures of speech. It'll be good for students who are not from English literature background or who do not understand these figures of speech, similes, personifications, metaphors, synecdoches. Just find a way to understand them and spot them in the poem, right? That's the second part. Like a drawer of knives, your mind lay open like a drawer of knives, bridal London. I can taste the grief. Then slum's years have buried you. That's the second thing. Third thing is, what goes stanza by stanza, and what is the poet trying to hint at in the first stanza? What is happening in the first stanza? And then what is happening in the second stanza? What is happening in the third, the fourth? And then you go through all the understanding of different stanzas and you try to find out what seems to be a thread, which is a theme of that poem. What seems to be the thread running along all these different stanzas. Then there is a question that we have in UPSC 50 marks, unseen poetry. The questions that they ask is, what is the mood of the poem or the poet? that is something you need to work out when you're reading the poem. What is the mood of the poet or the speaker in this poem? I think the mood is angry and not trying to console, but he's trying to make the protagonist feel better. He's giving a philosophical opinion twist to the entire episode to make her understand, to make her feel better about what happened. And that is extremely difficult thing to do. So that what's the mood of the poem or what's the mood of the poet? Then that again, when they ask you in that question, what's the mood of the poem, what's the mood of the poet? And if you say the mood is angry or consoling, you have to prove it with the words or the references from the poem. Why do you think the poet is angry as well as empathetic and sad at the same time? So how do you prove that the poet is feeling sad? He can taste the grief right in the beginning. And it is so sad that he said, suffering is exact and I dare not console you. So he's respecting the situation. He's empathetic and respecting the situation the protagonist is in. So mood of the poem, theme of the poem, certain lines, that's the kind of question they ask in the unseen poetry. And the overall theme of the poem. So when you read the poem twice, thrice, out loud, you walk through figures of speech, you try to make sense of each stanza, and then you put it all together. And this is not going to happen in one sitting. So you work at it in a couple of days, right? You don't just read a poem and then you read it, you work at it for an hour, and then you leave it, and then you come back to it and look at your notes. So it's good to print out these poems and make your notes on one side of the paper, and then come back to it and see what you felt reading for the first time and how do you feel reading the second time or the third time, right? Let's move on to the poem Mr. Bleaning. Any questions? Please write in the chat box. I'll try to share. It's probably not going to happen. Something is might have. Okay. Everyone's got Mr. Bleaney?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. This was Mr. Bleaney's room. Now this part is in the course. So there are two characters in the poem. This was Mr. Bleaney's room. He stayed the whole time he was at the bodies till they moved him. That's it. That's what the landlady showing the room to the new tenant who is the speaker. This was Mr. Bleaney's room. He stayed the whole time he was at the bodies till they moved him. Flowered curtains, thin and frayed, fall to within 5 inches of the sill, whose window shows a strip of building land, tussocky littered. Mr. Bleaney took my bit of garden property in hand, bed, upright chair, 60-watt bulb, no hook behind the door, no room for books or bags. So it's happening as in she's showing him the room and he's observing. So there is a POV of the room. It's almost like a cinematic scene, POV, whatever he's observing of the room, and whatever information she is giving him. He was here the whole time. Then he notices flowered curtains, thin and frayed, fall to within 5 inches of the sill, whose window shows a strip of building land, tussocky littered. Mr. Blenny took my bit of garden property in hand, bed upright, upright chair, 60-watt bulb, no hook behind the door, no room for books or bags. I'll take it. So it happens that I lie where Mr. Blenny lay and stub my fags on the same saucer souvenir and try stuffing my ears with cotton wool to drown the jabbering set he egged her on to buy. I know his habits, what time he came down, his preference for sauce to gravy, why he kept on plugging at the four-aways, likewise the yearly frame, the Frinton folk who put him up for summer holidays, and Christmas at his sister's house in Stoke. But if he stood and watched the frigid wind tootling the clouds, lay on the fusty bed, telling himself that this was home, and grinned and shivered without shaking off the dread that how we live measures our own nature, and at his age, having no more to show than one hired box, should make him pretty sure he warranted no better. I don't know. So it ends with a question. So we have a description of Mr. Blenny's lifestyle, which is very drab and simplistic. Very few belongings. Life so predictable that just looking around his room, the speaker could put together pieces of his life, which was very simple. Where he spent his Christmases, where he spent his Easters, what kind of food he ate. Some words I'm asking you to underline. Thin and frayed, third line for stanza. Littered, tussocky, littered. Tussocky is a kind of grass. Littered, tussocky littered. No hook behind the door, no room for books or bags. Frigid wind, second last stanza, frigid wind. Fusty bad. Shaking of the dread. This is a man of minimal needs and minimal lifestyle. When we first read this poem, the idea that comes to our head is that speaker is describing a man's life and commenting upon him and showcasing an post-war, urban, isolated, lonely, minimal, drab, and a very isolated life. And he's commenting at him, but why? What is he trying to get to? That just by looking around the room, he can understand everything about him. It is so simplistic. It's actually sad to know about this kind of a man. But then he comes to the last part. If he stood and watched the frigid wind tootling the clouds, lay on the fusty bed, telling himself that this was home. If Mr. Blenny considered this home, this is what the speaker is asking, wondering if Mr. Blenny considered this home, and if he thought that this is home, and he grinned and shivered. He was like, he considered this home, and the idea was okay to him, without shaking off the dread that how we live measures our own nature, and at his age having no more to show than one hired box, should make him pretty sure he warranted no matter. So, was he content with this life that he warranted no better? Was he content with this life and he was fine with it? And speaker is saying that who am I to ask or comment or judge him? Or is he saying that the way we live, the lifestyle, that defines us and lends us to societal judgments? Two things. One, this lifestyle that Mr. Blaney had, he was fine with it. And so who am I to question his lifestyle, howsoever painfully minimal and simple it might be? That's the one idea. Second idea, when he's saying, I don't know. Second idea is, based on the way we live, what we have, does that become the basis of being defined and judged by the society? Is that okay? Or is it okay to have whatever lifestyle we have? And if we are fine with it, if he grinned and shivered and shaked off the dread, if he did not take it seriously, then it's absolutely fine. Who am I to question it? But Philip Larkin is pointing at this idea, societal idea, that the society invariably will judge and critique you and demean you based on the lifestyle you have, based on what you have. So it's an extremely grave poem. And some critics have said that this is based on Philip Larkin's own life, the life of obscurity, monotony, very minimalistic, simple lifestyle, where you do not own much. So you sometimes you think that is this it? If I'm fine with it, is this okay to feel fine about it? Or what the society perceives about you and the way society judges you, should you pay heed to that? Should you also feel that the society might be right? Should you also feel that the lifestyle you have, the the lack of things or the lack of positions, that is that defines who you are? Like he says, how we live measures our own nature. So our lifestyle, can our lifestyle define who we are? It's a very deep, profound question. And I can very much identify with this, this kind of, this question, the last stanza, because I have lived my life very much, not like Mr. Blaney, of course, but I've always imagined myself living with an extremely frugal and minimal and simple lifestyle that sometimes makes me, now I'm talking about myself, sometimes makes me question that, does this define me in terms of society's eyes? Yes, it does. People judge you by the kind of brands you wear, kind of phones you have, kind of cars you drive, and they define you and they profile you based on that. So are you that person who's defined by the way you live? Even if you're happy with having nothing. So that is a pretty, I don't know whether you can understand this, being students and never having to, you are yet not in that societal judgmental pain. Of course, we all still get judged on how we are, what we do. So do you understand what I'm trying to get to? So Philip Larkin has ended this poem on an open question where he says, I don't know. And he's not sure. He just left it open. He's not, on one hand, he's figured out Mr. Blaney's lifestyle just by looking around his room. There is no room for books or bags. There are no hooks behind the door. That means he probably does not have much many clothes, the positions that he has, cigarette saucer, pen, ashtray, a couple of photographs, some slips, betting slips, where this line where he says he kept on plugging at the four aways. He's referring to the betting horses, four aways. So he could figure out his lifestyle in 5 minutes looking around. And he's saying, is it fair to judge someone based on the way he lived? And can we measure, define ourselves based on our lifestyle? Or is it okay if someone's okay with that lifestyle? Who the hell am I to judge or think about it? Does that make sense? When you read the questions based on Mr. Bleeny, it'll make more sense. You can write it in the chat because I won't be able to hear you today. The AC is very loud. Yeah, everyone. Does that make sense? All I can do is give you an opening into the poem. Yes. Can you hear me all? Yes. So there are a couple of things. One is, what is troubling the speaker, troubling the speaker in the poem? What's actually troubling him? Is despite being able to comment upon Mr. Bleeny's monotonous, simple, simplistic, bland life, he rents the same room. And he rents it right away, right in the beginning, he says, I'll take it. So he is worried about the fact that he's slipping into the shoes of Mr. Bleeny. He might be Mr. Bleeny himself. So when he is commenting upon Mr. Bleeny, he's actually having an interior monologue with himself. The way we live measures our lives, measures our nature. And is that okay? That's what he's asking. I don't know. Because when you look at someone else, it is easy to comment and critique. But when you live the same lifestyle, then it becomes something, you start to think, is this okay or is this not? For example, I'll give you an example from married life. Or even though you might not have experienced it, but you might have seen it around you. When a boy is getting married, before a guy gets married, especially in the Indian society, he is like, he expects to be the dominant partner. Sad but true. But the good thing is, invariably, as soon as the guy gets married, the dominance has to give way to submission, one way or another. So When someone's getting married, or you're not married, and you look at your friends who are all like bhigi billi, that's the phrase we use in Delhi in NCR. And you're commenting and you're laughing and you're saying, yeah, you are a bhigi billi in front of your wife. Be a man, do this, do that. And when you experience the same scenario yourself, then you understand. It is easier to comment somebody from a distance about any scenario. But when you actually go through that yourself, when you put yourself in those shoes, and that can only happen when it happens to you personally. A scenario that you commented upon objectively based on someone else's circumstances, as opposed to the same scenario happening to you, and then you understand. So there is again empathy in this poem, like the empathy in deceptions. Of course, in deceptions, that did not happen to the speaker, right? But the speaker in deceptions tries to get as close to understanding the scenario, the situation, the pain of the protagonist. So there is empathy there. And the similar empathy is here. He takes the same room, he's living in the same room, he's lying on the same bed. And just a moment earlier, he profiled and made a character sketch of Mr. Bleeny. Now he's lying on the same bed, looking out the same window. And now he understands. Very good, Anjali. That's a very fair point. And afternoons is you're gonna have to do it yourself. Very, very good points. Yes, in afternoons, they're doing 9 to 5 jobs. The life is monotonous. The playgrounds are being prepared for the next generation. The playground, the mothers are doing their clothes, washing the clothes, waiting for the kids to grow up. And then the same playgrounds where the kids played, those playgrounds become the love grounds of the young couples. And then the mothers, the cycle of life, something he refers to in afternoons. And afternoons is also metaphorically, it's the fag end of human life, the passing of age, the later part. Fantastic. So I think I've managed to help you understand these 2 poems, at least help you understand, get through. Now when you read them and you'll read the questions, it'll make more sense. And Ranveer asked, when writing an answer, can we mention similar idea example like societal pressure? I would recommend you not to go outside the text for any example or references. Okay, this is not a GS answer. So whatever we write about, it has to be from the text. Okay, now let's talk a little about Lord Jim. How many of you have managed to read Lord Jim so far? It's a small book and it's a beautiful book. Nobody has read it so far, I guess. Okay, so please read it. It's a small book, read it fast. We'll have a class on Monday evening. And we'll do the questions of Philip Larkin. Do the PYQs of Philip Larkin. Read the text Monday evening. Monday is 25, 26. Let's make it on 27th. So read it on 27. Read it by 27. Keep a couple of things in mind. Keep the idea of post-colonialism and Orientalism that we talked about last time. How does that impact the prime protagonist, Jim, in the beginning? Take notice of the narrative technique, how the story is told. That is very important concept of Lord Jim. How the story is told. I want you to tell me a lot about that. And study the character of Lord Jim from start to finish. His journey and what he made of it. Okay. So on that note, let's finish tonight's class. And I'll see you on Tuesday evening. Please finish the reading by then. And okay. Everyone has the text, right? PDF is also available. Kindle is available, PDF is available, but please read the text. And read it quick. It's a small text. Two things to keep in mind: the character of Jim and how the story is narrated, the narrative technique, how the story is narrated. There are two things that are happening in the narrative technique. First three chapters, different kind of narration, and then a different kind of narration. Keep that in mind. Thanks a lot for your time. I hope the session was useful. And see you in the next class. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you all.